Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, How Conversational AI Improves Customer Experience. My name is Chris Bechtel. I'm the VP of Growth here in the Americas for Boost AI, and I will be your host today. We've got a terrific lineup of content for you to talk about how conversational AI improves customer experience. We've got a great agenda for you today. I'll be doing some introductions of our two speakers momentarily. We're going to talk about customer experience trends. What is conversational AI in practice, insights from the Nordic banking leader DNB Bank, what makes boost.ai different, and of course our Q&A. A little bit about us in case you don't know about Boost. We are located, our headquarters are in Norway, with offices in Los Angeles, where I am today, though it's not sunny Los Angeles, unfortunately. We do have, in terms of clients, we have Europe's #1 credit management company. We have the largest company in Scandinavia, 7 of the 10 largest banks in Norway, 2 of the largest Scandinavian telco companies, and the top Nordic insurance companies. We're expanding into the US market. We do have customers here in the US as well, and many, many companies that are currently in discussions with us and working on pilots and other things. So it's a very exciting time. We have nearly 100 employees throughout the world, primarily most of the team in Norway. So of course, we want to put customer experience first, and the rest will follow. That's really the belief here. So it's not really about technology, it's really about customer experience. So the two fantastic speakers we have today is, of course, our co-founder and Chief Commercial Officer, Henry Iversen with boost.ai. And we have Jan Thomas Lerstein, who is the SVP of IT and Emerging Technologies at DNB Bank. So first up, I'd like to welcome Henry.
Hello, and thank you for the introduction, Chris. So the first part, I want to go a little bit through on the key challenges in the customer journey today. So of course, nowadays, everybody's talking about customer experience. If you went to any events, webinars, everybody's talking about customer experience. And I think it's rightly so, because the user and the customer today expect much more than before. So the customer will expect that you have availability around the clock. They will expect that things are easy and simple to use. And that's the reason, for example, Uber is doing really great, is that they are able to take something which is not really new, transportation, but just making it much simpler. So as long as you have the app downloaded, you can order transportation anywhere in the world. And if you look at the banking industry, there's been a lot of changes the last years. So before you needed to go to the physical bank in order to withdraw money, to do a payment, to pay a bill. But of course, now you have all those services available at your fingertips, either through online banking, through the web, or by mobile banking. So things are definitely in a change, and what we see is, of course, getting a response fast enough is, of course, it's not always easy. Companies have a lot of channels available, and usually there is waiting time on those channels. So what we have seen in general and in average is, for example, that there is 2 to 3 minutes waiting time on human chat. On phone, you can have everything from having a couple of minutes to maybe 10 or more minutes waiting time for the customer. And of course, we like to get things done as soon as possible. And that's the reason you need to see how we can utilize new technology as conversational AI. So what we see in a typical customer journey is not only the reactiveness, so meaning that a problem occur from the customer side and then they need help to resolve it. But I think it's also about actually anticipate and help the user when they actually need it. So in some cases, maybe help them before they actually know they have a problem. And I think that is that would be a key part of the customer journey going ahead, is the ability to anticipate and understand the need of your customer actually before they occur. So what we see as the solution going forward, if we want to have the one-to-one communication at scale, if you think about the last 10 to 20 years, people are getting used to self-service tools, services online. So for example, when you earlier booked airline tickets or travel tickets, you also needed to have a help at the travel agency to get that. Now, of course, you're able to do that yourself. And of course, that has lowered the prices and made it much more cost effective to order tickets and travel. And people are used to having the self-assisted help. So they're used to getting help, finding information on the home pages, using an app to get information. But I think what this technology enables is, of course, taking that a little bit back to the more one-to-one communication. So as long as you are able to anticipate and understand your customer, you can have more communication with them than you're able to have today. So imagine if you have 5 or 10 million customers, it's of course difficult to call everyone. But of course, with this type of technology, you're able to actually reach out and talk to them even more. So using conversational AI and chat together really brings a lot of exciting opportunities in the customer journey. And of course, you want to make sure that you utilize the data you have about the customer as well, in a good way, of course, to make the service even more smart and helpful. Chat is definitely a rising channel. So in all verticals and all industries, chat are trending, and it has a really upwarding trending curve. And we see also that people tend to like to use the chat, and especially when you look at the younger generation, which are grown up with the Messenger and other chat channels. So they are used to using the chat channel, and they use it really naturally. But of course, the problem with the human chat, as stated as earlier, with the waiting time, the humans are a lot of the time not fast enough, and we also see a lot of the question which are asked in the chat is also able to be resolved by the virtual agent. So that means that you need to look at this as a collaboration as well. So having the virtual agent as your first line support, and of course you want to make sure that you have humans in the loop in case the virtual agent is not able to respond to your question. So the benefits by using conversational AI is many, but just having the 24/7 availability is a really nice benefit for a customer. And what we also see when implementing the technology is that we also see that people tend to actually have more communication at the later hours. But of course, now you don't need to have the conversation within the opening hours. You can actually have those around the clock. So I think that is a really nice value. So people can use and talk to you when you actually need it. But also being instant, just having the quick response. So we are able to respond within a matter of within a second. As I said, where the average waiting time could be minutes on the chat. Proactively, I like the idea on being proactively, anticipate the need of your customers. So for example, we have an example with one of our clients where when you try to log in to the online bank, and if you have some issue logging in, we will proactively come up and have a solution for your problem. So in that case, you actually help the customer before they actually reach out to you. And by just adding that functionality, being proactive, they were able to reduce the questions regarding those issues by 25% just overnight. And if you look at capacity, so a typical good conversational AI platform is able to maybe handle 1 million conversation each day. So that means that you always have the security and safety that occur if some unknown things will occur. So for example, in a bank, for example, so for some reason your online bank go down, you have probably much more traffic than usual. So of course, this enables you to actually handle a lot of conversation, and that also brings a much easier day for the people working on customer service, because they know that they have always a helper in that sense, which is able to respond to a lot of inquiries at the same time. So consistency is also an important feature here. So that means that you are able to have the same type of conversation with the same quality each time. So even if you meet your customer on a messenger channel, on a web, on other channels, you're able to give the same experience every time and make sure that you have the same quality on all the conversation you have. And I think also this ties really nicely up with the simple user experience. So meaning that you have the information you need in a much simpler interface. So if you look at, for example, in a bank, you probably have a lot of subjects around loan, insurance, and then you have a lot of under categories on each of those subjects. And of course, managing and designing all those information is sometimes a little bit difficult, and it's of course really hard to find. So what a lot of the clients we are working with now is looking into is basically to replace the frequently asked question part, replace a part of their homepage, since this is a new interface. So now we will toss it back to Chris.
Thanks, Henry. So next up, I'd like to introduce our next speaker, who is Jan Thomas Lerstein, who is the SVP of IT Emerging Technologies with DNB Bank. Welcome, Jan Thomas. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me to speak today.
Oh, we're super pleased to have you. So if you could just, tell everyone a little bit, just, introduce yourself.
So yeah, my name is Jan Thomas. I work in DNB, which is the largest financial institution in Norway. I have been working in DNB for about 20 years, and most of that time I've been working with contact centers and service automation. I've been working with chat and chatbots for the last 3 years, and for the last year and a half, or a little more maybe, I've been working with you guys at Boost.
Wonderful. And, I guess, what sort of was your, mission and business goal around, some of the work that you've been doing over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so the division or section that I had in DNB is called Emerging Technologies, and our mandate is to revitalize existing value chains and create new business value through new technologies. And of course, there's been a lot of hype around conversational UI, AI, and natural language processing the last years, and we saw that we had great potential of really creating some real value in our chat channel, which is also the fastest growing customer service channel, as Henry talked about. In DNB, we have a 24/7 operation in our customer service. We support about 2 million retail customers and 200,000 business and corporate customers. Every year we get around 7 million inquiries to our customer service. And we have about 1,000 people working there, making us the second largest customer service organization in the country. One of the channels that we saw was growing really fast was the chat tool.
And so tell us a little bit about, I guess, the business goal or the challenge, right? So you saw obviously the rise in chat, right? Where your customers were naturally moving to chat as a preferred method to engage with you. Now, I guess, was your business goal sort of a combination of both some automation improvements, ultimately potentially to save on people and cost, but also to improve customer experience? Was it sort of a mix of those two was sort of the reason to kind of look for doing something?
So cost efficiency, of course, is always a goal, but since we have a really high customer service score already in our chat channel, we didn't want to lose that. So definitely keeping the experience at the same level in the chat channel was definitely a goal. But since chat is a very online channel, we thought that that would be very easy to achieve as long as we didn't set the goals of automation too high.
Right. And so then obviously you had made you had decided, okay, great, chat is a viable channel. And so then you made some sort of early experiments. Tell us a little bit about those sort of early experiments and what you were able to learn from it.
Yeah, so this is a really important part of our success story, as that we wanted to understand chat automation before we made it into a huge product. Started with a really small team, and also with a channel that we saw as not as risky to fail. So we already had quite a good presence in social media and a lot of customer service, even on Facebook and on Messenger. As we saw that Facebook was introducing some tools and we were already using Microsoft, we thought that that would be a good place to experiment and learn. So we built a very simple chatbot on Messenger and focused on the frequently asked questions. So when we went in production in April 2017, we could answer about 100 unique questions. But what we learned from this MVP was both how to build conversations, how to train models, and what we should really look for when we were targeting the more high value traffic that we have in our online banking. We also learned that a seamless and easy transition to humans or a real agent was important. That also makes it a lot easier to get started if you have quite a high confidence threshold and always give the customer the option to talk to a human.
And so that was obviously one of the big considerations in selecting Boost as a vendor. Perhaps you could tell us a little bit about, that experience. And so obviously you learned quite a bit through this messenger experiment, the importance of a seamless handoff to a human. What else did you learn that was important and that allowed you to select Boost as your ideal vendor?
Yeah, so we had a lot of learnings from the first MVP, everything from what we wanted the user interface to be like, how we wanted to orchestrate the conversations to personalize them, but also how to leverage our existing agent desktop. So we had quite a list of requirements when we started scanning the market for possible vendors. What we found was that a lot of the vendors wanted to control the whole value chain, everything from the agent interface to the customer interface. And when we started talking to Boost, we saw that they really had a more customer-centric approach, not just for the end users, but also for their clients. So they understood our needs, and what we were looking for was someone who could handle the AI and NLP part of it, but still allow us to develop the channels the way that we wanted to, handle a lot of the integrations ourselves, and of course also help us with that when needed. So we found definitely in the market Boost to be the best match for us, and also the vendor that understood our needs the best.
Terrific. And you have some terrific results. So tell us a little bit about, obviously once you went through that process, I guess before we get to these results, real quick, like how long did the process take? How was your experience in working with the Boost team to actually implement the solution, with these complex requirements, build out intents, that type of thing. Tell us a little bit about that experience in making these results happen.
Yeah. So first of all, coming from financial services, every process compared to other industries will take a lot of time. But I found that what really took time was more the internal process in D&B. So we found Boost to be very quick in understanding our needs, very good at answering our questions and concerns. So I wouldn't say that time was a factor at all.
Wonderful. And so then tell us a little bit about the results. I think, were somewhat surprised at some of the results. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right, Chris. We were very surprised. We had done a very simple MVP already on Messenger, and we had achieved there an automation rate of 65%. But then again, the types of questions that you will get in Messenger will be extremely high level and general, and also it's very limited what you're allowed to communicate in the social media channel. When we were looking at automating our online banking chat, we had an expectation of best case automating 30%, but our business case was actually built around 20% automation. So when we went in production first in June and then again on logged in pages in October that same year, we were amazed to see that we achieved overnight an automation rate of over 70%. We were actually so surprised that we decided by our own concern to actually make it less automated. So we're now around 51%, and we can answer about 3,500 different questions. And if you look at the customer service traffic at home, we're actually automating now 17% of all customer service to the bank. So these results are really great and quite surprising also.
Wow. And so for those that may not know exactly what an automation rate means, so ultimately what that means is 17% of all inquiries that come to customer service today are automated. Is that correct?
There are actually 17% of all questions that go to our customer service are answered by our chatbot Aino without any human interference.
Fantastic. And now, is it correct that Boost is still does serve as 100% of inquiries that come in, but then of this 51% is actually answered by the virtual agent, and the other 49% gets seamlessly handed off to a live person? Is that correct?
That is right. So we want all the incoming chats to go through Boost, and then we have some rules to determine whether or not it should get answered by the chatbot. So some customers, because of their value or other characteristics with the customer, will go directly to an agent chat, but also we're not sure enough what the question is, we'll offer this seamless transition to an agent.
Right. And now you also made a concerted effort to promote chat across your channels. Is that right? What would you say to those? I mean, because to me, obviously, I'm biased, but any organization where I go, whether it's online or mobile, and there isn't chat readily available, it seems silly to me at this point. Now, you guys have made a concerted effort to make chat readily available on multiple touch points that customers interact. Is that right? You really wanted to drive people to this channel. Is that correct?
Definitely, we want to make chat very available, but we also want it to be a choice. So chat is just one of many choices the customer has to contact us. And we don't want to, we haven't done any activity to really promote the chat channel, and definitely not any promotion of the chatbot itself. So it's always the chat experience that we're looking at, and in cases where it makes sense to automate, that's where we'll automate. But when we sense that the customer really needs or wants a human, we'll offer that as well.
Right. Oh, fantastic. And so ultimately then obviously it has some terrific business benefits. And just quickly before we dive into some of those details, I think might be important for those listening to understand. So you built a business case. Now, I know Boost in many cases will do on-site business case workshops with customers. How did you go about developing your business case? Was that something you did in conjunction with Boost, or is that something you'd already done before you involved us? Just wondering how you work through that process.
Yeah, so we had a pretty good idea of the business case before we selected the vendor, and our approach was to look at the number of full-time employees, because people are very expensive in the Nordics. And we had more than 100 people dedicated to the chat channel alone. So the math is pretty easy. What could be a little bit more tricky is to get the business to actually commit to taking out these benefits once we are able to handle the traffic automatically. So that has been a process also to get business along with reducing their staff.
Correct. I see. And so now in terms of next steps, so obviously at this point, you began with, is that right? There was 35 FTEs and 8 FTEs. So tell us a little bit about the impact that's happened so far and what, where you're headed for 2019.
Yeah, so like I said, we started out day one with 70% automation. So we think that we could easily get back to at least 75 within the end of this year. Before we get there, though, we want to have more customized conversation flows and use a lot more of our APIs to actually be able to fully answer all aspects of the customer, not just telling a customer where to find their balance, but actually giving their balance from a list of accounts. And yeah, so a customer who wants to block a card to do the whole process of card renewal and everything. So to get these really tailored conversations, I think is essential to keeping our really high customer satisfaction scores where they are, moving forward with the automation rate.
And that's something I think that's critical to point out to those listening. It's not, the agent is not just answering questions, but you feel quite confident that the agent can also handle some, fairly important transactions, whether that's freezing a card, resetting a password, what types of, so I guess tell us a little bit about how confident you feel about the ability for the agent to be able to handle those types of transactions easily.
I definitely believe that a virtual agent can handle these type of conversations. And to get there, I think it's also good to have a strong team of data scientists, so you can actually work on the logs and you can look at what is happening in production and maybe even be able to predict the next question of the customer. So today we're very focused on just solving the first part of the problem, but I think in the future we'll like Henry also was talking about, understand the problem before the customer notices it and be more proactive in the way we communicate, even through virtual agents.
Yeah, fantastic. And so now I know that there are some other use cases that you're exploring. So, if you can briefly tell us a little bit about this one. This is an internal use case that you're working on, because again, you feel some additional applicability for what the virtual agent can do.
Yeah, so our first internal use case was this avatar that you see on the screen here. It's Justina, and she's our virtual lawyer. And our legal team and DNB is also very tech interested, and they think that legal tech is the next big thing. So they were really there all along the way when we were starting to work with our customer-facing chatbot, believing that legal advice is something that is quite expensive and can be a big asset to our employees. So it's been a fun experience also working with our internal customers on producing this or creating this virtual robot lawyer. It's been quite a big success, and we're very satisfied with the quality of the answers she can provide. But we still have a way to go to get our colleagues to actually use her more and leverage the full potential of the internal chatbots.
Oh, fantastic. And now you also had experimented with some other things. And I think in this case, there were some challenges, mostly with the complexity of the answers. Is that correct? So this was another use.
So this guy that you're seeing now is Fredrik. He is, or was supposed to be our robot credit specialist. So we worked with all the internal credit departments on trying to solve these really complex credit-related questions that our advisors would have. What we learned from this use case is that, for one, you don't always succeed with a chatbot, but also how important it is to work closely with your target group, manage their expectations, and also let them know the role of the business side in this type of project. So what we found with the problems that we were trying to solve with Fredrik was that the problems were extremely complex, and most of all, there were never any real answers. So it was more like an evaluation that you had to do where there is no answer, and then the expectation from our target group was that the robot would actually give the answers that they were not able to get today. So I think we're a little bit far from achieving that, but it was definitely a really fun experience and a very valuable experience in terms of learning.
Yeah, yeah. And it sounds like, again, to sum up some of your learnings, is that it's absolutely possible, for agents to successfully give answers as long as there is a single clear answer, which in this case there wasn't. And then, of course, if transactional capabilities are available, that's quite possible to do. Now, the other thing is, I think it's super fascinating to share with everyone is you've turned a section of the workforce into this new role of the AI trainer, which is what we collectively think is sort of the new role of the future. So tell us a little bit about the AI trainer and their role and what you've done with them at DNB.
Definitely, and what we see, at least where the technology is today, the real heroes and the drivers of this success story is having good AI trainers, because AI trainers, they create the content, they build the conversation flows, and they take the knowledge that they have from real work experience and put it into this robot. So we started out with 5 AI trainers, and they were all recruited from the customer service organization. Yeah, and that brings us a little bit back to what some people would call the downside of having a success story in automation, is that you will be left with a lot of redundant employees. Together with our union representatives and our HR department, we started a dialogue around how do we handle downsizing and what do we do with our employees. And one thing that we decided very quickly was that we would launch a reskill program for redundant employees. So in February of this year, we launched this 12-month reskill program, and we took employees from different parts of the bank who have been made redundant by different types of automation. And, these candidates are now going through an extensive certification along with you guys to become the next generation of AI trainers. And I think these will also be working on not only the existing INO, but also a lot of internal use cases.
Fantastic. Yeah, so tell us a little bit about, so I think for those listening, the way a Boost works is when we implement a project, we have a dedicated AI trainer that is the key point of contact, and we have an extensive education team in which we provide certifications for our partners to become AI trainers, and every one of our clients we have AI trainers that work with our clients, and every one of them has a team of AI trainers that take over and as Jan Thomas said, become really the hero of the implementation because they really are constantly monitoring in the easy to use dashboard, what's happening in terms of conversations, how to better train it, and those types of things. So tell us a little bit about, I guess, if you could, what was your experience sort of with our AI trainers and the education and the certification programs that we're providing for you?
Yeah, I think you're really spot on when it comes to focusing on AI trainers, because that was one of the things that made Boost stand out against other vendors. You yourself, as you said, have a big team of AI trainers, and we have one dedicated person in Boost that will help us when we have problems with the framework, and will also be very hands-on in coaching and training our internal AI. So that is something that gives absolute value, and where you will see other vendors actually saying that it's very easy to add content and to stuff training data into your models. So you guys have understood the importance of this role. So that's at least my perspective.
That's great. And I think that's important for everyone to know. We've seen, over and over how when you try and teach existing models that are set up new things, they often have a difficulty assimilating that new knowledge and in some cases break. So that's why we have built and architected a solution that, can be taught new and additional intents. Even if those intents might be different. And Henry's going to talk to us in a moment about ASU, automated semantic understanding, about how we can understand potentially two different intents in the same conversation. But before we get to that, just love to hear about where you see the future headed, Jan Thomas, both at DNB as well as, conversational AI in general.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to make it brief because I see we're running a little bit short on time. But one of the things that we're experimenting with right now is introducing voice. So to use voice API so that the customer can choose either to type or talk to the agent. Another thing that I think is essential to reach a high automation level is to use our banking API so that we can really tailor and customize conversations. Higher levels of personalization, I think, is also important. The customer really expects us to know what are their products, what is their balance before they start a conversation. And we have some smaller business areas that we're targeting. One is trading, and for internal use cases, we're looking at the customer service work manual. So we're actually making that manual into a bot. I think as we're seeing our customer traffic shifting from online banking to different digital apps, I think we have to make a software developer kit so that all our digital teams can produce chat interfaces and use our Boost content as a brain. And above all, I think the way that we're changing our way of working internally also to move from this old-fashioned project and waterfall thinking to actually having a lean and fully agile DevOps team.
Fantastic. And final question, and then we'll toss it back to Henry. We'll get to some questions, and yes, we are running a little short on time. Hopefully you've gotten some great value and insight from exactly what Jan Thomas has gone through at D&B. And I guess final question is, what do you say to for those listening that are in a similar role, whether it's in banking or another type of organization that's sort of looking at exploring conversational AI and further automating, customer experience connections, what recommendations do you have for them based on what you've learned over the last couple of years?
I would say to always think about the customer experience and the channel first. That's the most important thing. Don't get too greedy. Don't have too high ambitions. Try to start with a little bit, set your targets a little bit low, and focus on quality. And then I think the automation rate and the customer experience will get there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your insight and experience. I really appreciate your time. Now I'm going to toss it back to Henry, who's going to, talk to us a bit about what I think is super critical to understand, the significant differences between the way Boost works versus other conversational AI platforms out in the market.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And thank you, Jan Thomas, for sharing your story from D&B. And I think you have done a great job as an organization implementing the project. As Chris said, we do things a little bit different towards other vendors. So that means that we, as D&B is doing, so we don't only focus on some of the chat conversation. We enhance 100% of the chat conversation. So that means that we are able to automate or resolve a lot of the question directly by the virtual agent. But in those cases, the virtual agent doesn't have is trained to solve the question, or in some cases you want to make the human to take the conversation anyway. That's the reason we have the possibility by using our AI to reroute to the right advisor. So typical for a bank, you will have people on different skill set. So typical insurance, pension, different loans. So of course, that also will bring down the waiting time because we are able to handle the conversation right away. And then we can hand over, and we can also ask a couple of follow-up questions before we hand over to human. So that means the whole chat conversation is done much more effectively. There's a lot of technology available in the market, and I think there's a little bit difficult sometimes to really navigate in the market. So there is everything from more rule-based technology, which is quite simple to set up. You can basically go in and Google chatbot and find the platform, and you can build your own chatbot within 10 minutes. Of course, that chatbot will not be particularly enterprise friendly. There's also what we call syntax-based technology. So this is typical delivered by the vendors who've been in the market for a while. So this is a technology actually developed by Google for some years ago. It's mostly used on internal cases. And the reason they usually use it in internal cases is that it's difficult to handle misspelling, bad grammar. And of course, as you probably know, using chat, that really encourage to actually have a kind of a more informal language than you usually will have compared to, for example, email. So, of course, this technology, in that sense, is not suitable for that outward and external purposes. So what you typically see is more than the newer vendor coming into the market are using some machine learning models, typical neural networks, to understand the intent. So when we're talking about intent, we're talking about on the purpose of the question. So typical, if you say you want to have a car loan, And you can also say that, yeah, I need money to buy a car. So the intent is the same. You want the car loan, but you can say it in different ways. So we utilize neural networks to train the model. But what we also have developed is our proprietary technology, which we call ASU. So ASU stands for Automatic Semantic Understanding. So we basically build a layer on top, which brings understanding in addition to the prediction. So that means that we can, for example, handle multiple intents. We are able to eliminate these false positives. So a false positive is, in that case, you are giving a wrong answer. And that is kind of a cardinal sin within this conversational AI field, is that you give the wrong answer. And everybody had the experience that they asked a question, they got a response, but it's not quite what they asked for. But also being able to understand complexity is something also the ASU bring into play. So just to show you some couple examples how we actually this ASU manifest. So you can see on the left side, this is a typical question where you ask 2 questions in the same inquiry, the same chat bubble. So if you're not using ASU, you're probably going to pick one of those. So you're going to take a choice. Okay, you're going to respond to case study or sign a newsletter. In this case, you respond to newsletter. So with ASU technology, you actually enables that you understand those 2 intents. And of course, you want to come up not saying that, okay, I have 2 answers now. So you want to start the conversation saying, okay, I see that you're asking maybe for a couple of things here. So here are some options which I think can help you. So in this case, the user is able to actually click and decide which of the topic you want to get help with first. Another case, so sometimes people add more information into the equation. So if you want to buy funds for my dog, I'm not sure if that's possible, but most solution will just give you how to buy funds. You're not regarding dog as an important concept. So what we will do is recognize that we don't understand completely what you ask for, but I think you want to create and set up funds account. So again, you want to make sure that you are not over confidently when you respond, but instead giving a more honest response that I think I have something which can help you. Yeah, please let me know if this is correct or not. So this is the basic of all conversational AI, to actually being able to understand the question of the user. And then it doesn't matter if you have all the fancy integrations in place on the back end if you're not able to understand the intent of the user. And that is by far the most important capability in a virtual agent. And this is something we do better than all the players in the market. Again, showing with an example where you ask a lot of questions, you basically give a lot of information before you actually come to the point. So in this case, most solutions will just fail, say, okay, this is too much information for me, so I don't have a question for you. But we are able to extract the important concept here, the important information, and still give a valid response. So lastly, some recommendations before we go into the Q&A. These recommendations are also described in the guide, the Conversational AI guide we have developed, which we, of course, recommend downloading. But I think it's the recommendation. I just want to go briefly through them. Having a human available on the other end is really important, and that is something we encourage all clients to do as soon as possible. But also being able to give up your purpose as an agent. So typically you want to say that, okay, I'm able to respond to banking question, or I'm able to respond to insurance question, but if I don't have an answer, I will reroute you to the right human, for example. So you need to state the purpose of the advisor as soon as possible. And I think maybe the most important thing is that you start with pre-trained content. So with the DNB case, they were able to utilize our 2,500 intents, which were already pre-trained. So that was a starting point from DNB. They actually developed this further. But building all the content yourself, especially within banking, insurance, and the financial sector, that is a hard work. So find the vendor which already have a lot of this pre-built for you, and then you can kickstart the project much faster. And of course, you need to identify the KPIs in the project. So if you want to raise your CSAT score, if you want to have more automation, that is something you should define in the project as soon as possible. Okay, Chris, do you want to get to the Q&A session?
Terrific. Yes. Thanks again for everyone who is attending. And if everyone's okay, we're going to extend just a couple of more minutes past the hour here so we can get to some of these questions quickly. A couple of great questions have come up. I want to make sure that we can answer them. So first up, I guess this is, to you, Jan Thomas, what common barriers, have you seen to just implementing some of the virtual agents? Were there any barriers that you sort of were encountering internally to get support for the project?
Of course, there's always a lot of internal resistance in a big organization, especially when you are seen as a threat to the existing staff. Also, you will always have skeptics that say that I've tried chatbots other places and they don't really work, and most of them can just tell jokes and things like that. Yeah, a lot of different types of resistance. But I think, again, if you start small and prove that this is something that you can do, I think that's the best evidence to support moving on.
Terrific. And to Henry, then, you went briefly into, some of the key components, but what, for those that are looking at solution providers and vendors out there, and as you made clear that not everyone is alike, certainly there are some pretty significant differences that can have a pretty significant impact. What recommendations do you have? Are there some key things that you think people should particularly be looking for when they're looking at a vendor?
Yeah, and as you probably know, there's a lot of hype in the market now, and I think you need to look not only on the slides the vendor brings, but also test and try technology available. So usually what we recommend is basically go into the vendor and test the live agents. What DNB has done as a good practice is that they digged into the technology. They understand the questions they asked in the RFP, and they also had a good understanding of how the technology works, which is also beneficial when you want to go out and searching for vendors. So I will definitely recommend get your hands a little bit dirty, maybe get a team and investigate the solution, because it's you need to understand what you're talking about, and that is not always a trivial task to understand the intent of a customer.
And so back to Jan Thomas, question about the quality at the end of the day, right? Because as you said, and we said at the beginning, it's really about quality customer experience. And that really is the result of getting people the answers that they need, the help that they need rapidly, seamlessly. Do you have, what's been the results so far sort of in customer experience and satisfaction? Have you been able to measure that anecdotally? Like what's been the response from customers?
So overall, we still have very high customer satisfaction scores, and we monitor it closely. But then, at least in the Norwegian market, you have a lot of other players that are monitoring financial services and customer service in general. So we have quarterly reports that are independent, telling us how good or bad our service is. And of course, right after we launched, the reports weren't excellent. But we've seen that from last quarter to this quarter, we've actually gone up 20 points on an independent survey, When it comes to focusing on quality, I think quality is something that you always have to prove. You have to prove to the customer that you can give them the service and the answer that they're looking for, and also make sure they feel safe, that we're not taking anything away from you. You can still talk to a human, but type of question, if we can answer it, we will give you a response. And if you're not happy with the response, you can still talk to an agent.
Yeah, fantastic. And this is probably a question maybe for both of you, but I think language is an important one that we haven't not yet touched on. Obviously there's different dialects, locally. There might be, obviously people interacting in different languages specifically. I guess first to you, Jan Thomas, how many languages are you supporting currently, and what's been the experience there on the language side?
Yeah, so in production right now, we're only supporting Norwegian, but we have experimented quite a lot with other languages, and we find, so far at least, the models to be quite agnostic. Excuse me. So we can actually hit the right intents even without specifically training on other languages. So that's probably something Henrik can talk more about. When it comes to dialects, we don't see that as a problem. And two reasons for this. Our experience so far is that the model can actually handle quite a lot of dialect-specific words and phrases. And also we see on the user end that users with really strong or specific dialects tend to modify when they're using it in official channels, such as with the bank.
And to you, Henry, we've had a couple of questions about other, locales such as Spain, other markets. Talk to us a little bit about all of the markets and languages we're in, and how that would work from a customer standpoint.
Yeah, so we cover all the major languages in the world, everything from English, Portuguese, Spanish, French, Italian. So I think we cover 25, 30 languages. And what we can also do, we can actually handle multiple language in the chat. So what we will do is our AI will detect which language the conversation starts on and continue the conversation and giving responses in that specific language. So as Jan Thomas said, we're able to handle many languages, and you can actually build all the language support within one model, which is really beneficial.
And that's terrific. Now, I think, let's see, a couple of questions here. I want to make sure I get to everything that everyone's asked. Somebody asked about sort of, there's obviously other products. Salesforce, for example, has Einstein, with their primarily just deploying to agents, just to help agents answer questions. Do you have any insight sort of on how, we're different than Salesforce and the Einstein product?
Yeah, to get into the overall differences, so of course they will focus on their own software, and of course they are not that motivated of automating, because of course Salesforce live on having agents connected to the system, so they probably have some different incentives than we have. But I think in general, even if they have focus on their area, what we do is having a much more focus on the financial sector and the banking. As I said, we have pre-built content for those verticals. So it's definitely a better technology, but we also have the vertical focus, which is also really important when you do the projects. So for banks, for example, and companies within the financial sector, we're actually able to guarantee a success rate and automation rate based on our prior success.
And so how many intents would you say we have? Because I think that's a critical component. All of the analysts, Gartner has recommended this numerous times in some of their coverage, about looking for vendors that have industry-specific knowledge and experience. And as you said, obviously we have deep experience in banking and finance, as well as insurance and telco, as well as municipalities, as a matter of fact. But tell us, how many intents do we have already pre-built just for banking alone?
I think we have at least over 2,000 intents pre-built, and those are pre-built, modeled with training data, test data, and everything. So they are based on the experience we have within our many banking customers. I think we have over 20 banks which we are working with now.
And this is another follow-on question. I think what's critical for everyone listening to understand about the difference in what ASU will do for us. You know, Henry talked a little bit about the elimination of false positives. But I also know that because the dashboard is so easy to use and be able to monitor for the AI trainers, ASU can also detect the potential need to create a new intent. Is that right? Could you tell us a little bit about that? Because it might identify, wait a minute, this seems to be an additional intent. Might you give us a little information on that?
Yeah, so correct. So instead of being reactive and going in and finding the weaknesses in the model, because it's of course it's a continuous journey to improve and make the virtual agent better. So instead of being reactive, we have a more proactive approach. So that means that we will actually give suggestions on where the weaknesses is, but also how we can actually improve it. So that is the AI in practice, helping the AI trainer to do their job.
And I think it's important for everyone to realize, again, as Jan Thomas had said, in our implementation, there's a dedicated AI trainer that's working with the AI trainers internally that are being trained at the client. And typically during that implementation and testing phase, you know, we're meeting with the customer even daily or weekly to review some of the findings in the dashboard and looking at, okay, what is ASU finding? So that we can potentially create, you know, and advise the customer to create their own intents. And then ultimately those AI trainers get, you know, and is this correct, Jan Thomas? Would you say at this point, your team of AI trainers now is self-managing, and have they been creating or identifying new intents that could be created or may need to be created?
That is definitely our experience. So we we have this close collaboration with the Boost AI trainers, and then on top of that, we also have our own data scientists. So we sometimes even mine for new intents on our own, but I would definitely say with support from the Boost team.
Wonderful. Well, I think we could probably continue for another hour here, but unfortunately, we have run out of time. So I wanted to thank both of you, Henry and Jan Thomas, for your time today and your insights, and thank everyone for attending. Again, we'll be sending out some follow-up email, which will include a link to this recording along with the slides. Also, for those of you that are in any stage of evaluation, whether it's early stage or a later stage of looking at a vendor, obviously I'd strongly encourage you to contact us, talk to us. As I mentioned briefly, we have also another unique component of what we do is we can certainly do a typical sort of, you know, proof of concept over 60 or 90 days, but we can also, and typically we've been recommending and doing a very rapid, what we call a rapid POC, which is over a 2-day. So we have both a business case workshop, and then we have a 2-day accelerated POC in which we can actually literally build out intents for your organization. You can see exactly how it's going to work. You get access to the dashboard training, so you can see exactly how it might work for you. So there's a very rapid ability to see what's possible. So I'd encourage you to reach out, connect with us, learn more. Here are some links to learn more, of course. So again, I want to thank our presenters and thank all of you for attending today. Wherever you are in the world, have a great evening or a great afternoon. And thanks again for attending.